But first, let's get into our first conversation. Do we need a referendum on assisted dying? That's what we're asking. Today, a private member's bill to allow assisted dying for terminally ill adults is being proposed to the House of Lords, as I showed you earlier. Speaking to the Express today, Dame Esther Rantzen says that her heart is lifted at the hope of dying in her favourite place. We're also going to be speaking to her daughter Rebecca Wilcox about this shortly. But first, on such an emotive subject, should we, the people, get a say? Should this be in the hands of the Lords and MPs? Or should we have a referendum on it? Henry, I'm going to start with you on this one. Would you like to see a referendum on assisted dying?
I don't think so. I know it's a big and emotive topic. It's very complicated, though, because if we were going to have a referendum on this, what would the question be? We have a referenda in this country very rarely. I mean, the last one, of course, was a Brexit referendum, in, out. It's very simplistic, much more complicated than people imagined at the time. And look at what we've been through in the last 8 years. It didn't really resolve what it was supposed to resolve. Then before that, 2011, we had one on changing the voting system. And there are several different types of alternative vote, proportional representation, etc. And
but it won't encourage people to get involved. Will it not encourage people to be educated on these subjects before making a decision?
It might be, but we have a parliamentary democracy for a reason. We are busy, we have a lot to do, some of us can't be bothered, we don't want to be engaged, so we send representatives to the House of Commons to do the heavy lifting, the thinking, the detail, the legislation, the drafting for us, because there are so many different layers towards this. I mean, are we talking about assisted dying? Are we talking about people who've got a terminal illness or people who find life unbearable? And they found in other countries, sometimes you have unintended consequences. And I think it was both Clement Attlee and Margaret Thatcher who said referenda are the last, not quite the last refuge of the scoundrel and the demagogue, but they've been used by populists like Mussolini, like Hitler and others, because they reduce very complicated issues to something extremely simple. And in the end, as we found, look at the in-out or remain or go out referendum that we had in 1975 on continued membership of the European community. It didn't resolve anything, and how many years later we had another Brexit referendum. So I think we should allow our politicians to do what they're paid for, think it through for us, and then make a decision.
Len, are you a fan of referendums?
I think referendums are good, but not how they've been carried out so far. I think there needs to be a lot more meat on the bones. I agree with Henry when he said, you know, it's too much of a simplistic black and white question. I think they need to debate it first. Then when they come with two options where they are informing us of those options, and I mean fully, like Brexit, they just said in or out. Yeah. I mean, what does that mean? How would you go about coming out of the EU? How would you stay in the EU? What would we do to come out? How would we build infrastructure, replace all of the people that are in this country, building our communities? There was none of that conversation.
There was a lot of unanswered questions, I suppose. Exactly. When it comes to complex issues, you have to be very clear. I mean, but if you just took this new bill, Lord Faulkner's bill, he has been very clear on the rules around what he considers assisted dying and how he thinks it should be played out. So maybe something like this would be a little bit more black and white when it comes to voting.
I think it would be good, though, because what you said, Henry, we have people that go and represent us, but I don't think they represent us that well insofar as a topic like this. If you were to gather all of the parliamentary representatives, how many of them have had to deal with or experience issues where somebody wants to, you know,
well, they're human
undergo
beings
euthanasia.
Well, they're human beings.
I know,
like
but
us.
we want the country where
got...
people are actually contemplating euthanasia to have a say in this conversation, or family and friends that are actually having to help make these decisions, not just a bunch of people, you know, a few hundred, that a very small percentage has even come into contact with challenges such as euthanasia.
Joining us now is Dame Esther Rantzen's daughter, Rebecca Wilcox. Rebecca, thank you very much for joining us. First off, how is your mum at the moment?
Well, as anybody knows who has a terminal illness or who lives with somebody who does, you live from scan to scan, and she has this incredible drug that she's on, which is a chemo drug, and at the moment it's holding everything at bay. So cancer is tiring, knowing that you have a terminal diagnosis is tiring, fighting a battle for assisted dying is exhausting. So she's remarkable considering what she's going through, but it's not great.
But this news today has given her a glimmer of hope, she says?
Yes, She's very optimistic as a person, and I really admire that. I am a little bit more guarded in my optimism about this. I feel we've been here so many times. What we're asking for is so specific and so reasonable that I don't know how it can fail this time. It is a terminal diagnosis with 6 months or less. It is nothing to do with mental health. It is nothing to do with disability. Anybody that thinks it is needs to go back and have a look at what the assisted dying campaign called Dignity in Dying have said about it. It's very carefully laid out. It is simply for those for whom death is going to be so painful that it needs to be shortened. And it's not about ending life, it's about shortening death. So it's those last 4 days of unimaginable pain where the pain crosses the morphine barrier and you cannot do anything about it. And not only is that completely awful for the person that's dying, of course, but their loved ones who are going to live with that memory for maybe as long as they live.
So what do you want to see happen? Does Lord Faulkner's bill, this one that's going through, in your mind go far enough?
Well, it's hard, isn't it? Because I don't know what will happen at the end of this. It's all a bit mysterious with the House of Lords and how that affects us as the people. I think a referendum is an interesting idea. I'm not sure that people are aware of the facts enough to have such a strong opinion on it. But I do know that every time the population has been asked, should we have assisted dying legalized in this country, it has been in favour, always over 50%, sometimes as much as 75%. Various parts of the UK are already heading for it being legalised. So clearly the people are on the side of it. So if there was a referendum, it would be great. I think they have a better idea on that than maybe perhaps Brexit, which I didn't think that anybody knew what they were doing and just said yes or no. And this does have subtleties. It does have a spectrum and it does have concerns, and there are safeguarding issues. Again, I would say have a look at what we are proposing. It is nothing to do with making people feel like they are a burden on society and that they should end their life. It's about giving people a choice with their death that they have in their life. And as Lord Faulkner has said in the past, even if I accompanied my mother to Switzerland, and she's very privileged in that she can afford to go to Switzerland, it's too expensive for many people. If I accompanied her, I would return home to a 2-year investigation, which he, quote, said was a hellish experience, and I'm not sure I would survive it.
I just want to ask you very quickly, Rebecca, what would you say to those that would criticise assisted dying on the basis that it could be a slippery slope? Not that this assisted dying bill has anything to do with mental health or has anything to do with maybe NHS putting pressure on people that are terminally ill to end things a little bit quicker. But it could end up in that direction.
Of course, and I've heard this argument many times, and I would say go back to the report that was published earlier this year, which was an incredibly, I'm so sorry.
No, don't worry.
I'm so sorry, I thought I'd turned that
Somebody
off.
saying, I see you on TV.
Yes, wonderful. I would say go back to the report that was published earlier this year, where they very carefully, very methodically, and very evenly went through all the evidence out there, looked at all the countries that already had this in place, the varying forms that they had it, and there is no slippery slope. There is no reduction in palliative care qualities. In fact, in some places it improves. They really believed that in this country it would have no effect on end-of-life care. There would be no slippery slope, so suddenly we're opening it up to anybody that just is having a bad day. It's nothing like that. That is scaremongering, and that is unhelpful with this. What we are looking for is kindness at the end, kindness and empathy with the fact that pain is intolerable sometimes, and it ruins the people that are around you. It ruins their lives and it ruins your end of life. Why can't somebody's end of life be a beautiful, loving thing? Why can't mom be surrounded by us all and we're all holding her hand and she's peaceful? Why can't we have that? There is no slippery slope. There is no deluge into terrible things happening. This is scaremongering. The practice that we're looking at is based on the Oregon model. It is very simple, it is very direct, it has a lot of safeguarding in place, and I am not saying that safeguarding shouldn't be there. I definitely think it should, and that vulnerable people shouldn't feel vulnerable. And I'm really upset that some people think that society wants them to end their lives. That is a societal problem. That is something we should definitely address, but I think that is separate to this.
Okay, Rebecca Wilcox, thank you very much. Sending love to your mum and the whole rest of the family. Thank you very much for your time.
Well, I'm sorry.
No, don't worry about it at all. You'd be surprised the amount of times that does actually happen. Okay, let's go to the calls then and see what you at home think. Should we have a referendum on assisted dying? Diane from Northumberland, you're up first. What's your view on this?
Yes, definitely. My children know now I'm not ill, I'm fine. I've had a wonderful life with my 2 wonderful children and my little grandson. But if I got to that point, I do not want them to watch me die in agony. I've had a fantastic life, and no, I do not want to die and have my children sit and watch me die in a horrendous state.
I don't think anybody would want that, Diane. But I suppose the counter-argument is that this could be a slippery slope. I know a lot of disability campaigners are very worried about it. What's your thoughts on that? How do we safeguard that that doesn't happen? How do we make sure that this just remains in place for those that are terminally ill?
Surely a doctor has got something to do with it.
Well,
I mean, he'll know to the point where if they can do something for you, that's fine. I watched my brother die 2 years ago, and it was absolutely horrendous. And he was the kindest, sweetest person you would ever meet. He'd do anything about anybody, but for him to die like that, that's the only part I can remember.
Diane, I can hear the emotion in your voice as well, and this is going to be an emotive topic for many, many people out of there, and I think the majority of people calling will have had a similar experience to yourself. I'm wondering whether Lynn has a point on what she said earlier, that actually a referendum on a subject like this would be a good idea because the general public may have more experience dealing with this sort of thing than perhaps those in the House of Lords and MPs who may enjoy, private healthcare, and private palliative care, which may not be the same.
Well, I have no faith in the House of Lords anyway.
Oh. So a vote for a referendum then, Diane.
Very good idea. Ask the people who are actually putting up with this.
Diane, thank you very much for your call. Sorry that we're getting so many calls actually on this. Bambi from London, what's your thoughts on a referendum on assisted dying?
Yes, definitely. And I think if you have independent doctors plus medical evidence of your terminal illness and the pain. I used to be a care assistant. I worked in a Bupa nursing home for the elderly. And towards the end of life, we was given food via liquid syringe in the mouth. But the body is just wasting away. And when doctors say they want to prolong life, well, that doesn't wash because doctors also perform abortions. So, do you see what I mean?
No, I don't think that's a completely different thing, Bambi, but I appreciate that your experiences compel you to think that that we should have a referendum on assisted dying.
But can they make that decision, Bambi? When you're having to feed them through a syringe, do you think their corpus mentis is as such that they can make such a, ardent decision, a serious decision?
No, not then. But I mean,
you could make it beforehand.
For the future now, for me and for Esther, everyone, we should have this option.
Bambi.
Because nobody will. I have 6 daughters. I would not want to go to Switzerland alone and die there. I would like to die in my place with my children, grandchildren around me. So yes, assisted suicide, a referendum, yeah.
Bambi, thank you very much. Janice from Norfolk, referendum on assisted dying. We're talking about the thought of a referendum here and whether it would work on this topic. What do you think?
I'd like to see it come in. I don't think a referendum is necessary, really. If somebody in government has got the guts to put it through, well, I'm sure that everybody would be grateful.
Keir Starmer said to Esther Rantzen himself that he would definitely be working on this, so it's something that he's looking at, maybe not as quickly as Dame Esther Rantzen might want. Could a referendum make that process quicker?
No, I don't think so.
So
I just think they've got to get on and do it. You
think the tide has changed enough anyway that most politicians would be in favour of it?
As I said to your previous lady, my husband was told he had obviously I can't say the word, esophageal cancer in September. As he left the hospital, he was handed a letter which had a do not resuscitate in it, and he didn't die until May. He literally got weaker and weaker and weaker, couldn't eat, couldn't drink, lay in bed, eventually slept and slept and slept. And when he was awake, he said, is it going to be soon? He couldn't wait.
I mean, that must have been very hard for your husband, but incredibly difficult for you to watch.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I've had MS for 50 years. I was in a wheelchair and I was caring for him. But in the end, he had to have nurses in to wash him, dress him, change him, put nappies on him. And for a terribly proud man, this was soul-destroying, absolutely embarrassing.
Really difficult.
And this is the thing, it's really important what Janice said there. I mean, what would the question be, and is this the right subject, emotive and difficult as it is, to reduce to a single question with a yes or no answer? Because if we do it for the very narrow circumstances that Lord Falconer's bill describes, then what about for people who may not have a terminal illness, but whose life is unbearable for other reasons? Like, you know, it might be motor neuron disease, you know, like Rob Burrow and, you know, Doogie as well.
And also you would have to have the cognitive ability to make that decision, and whether you would have that at that point when you were that terminally ill and wanted to make the decision. And
could you have an advance directive? What about if you had locked-in syndrome, like Tony Nicholson? There are quite a number of other issues that make life almost unbearable for people.
Janice, thank you very much for your call. Thanks for all your calls on that. We still had many more to come to, so apologies for not getting to you. Still to come, though, is it